Hey there, listeners, and welcome aboard to our brief reads into Ben Horowitz's The Hard Things About Hard Things.
It's
A classic.
it really is. It's a classic. And it's not your typical, business book, all sunshine and roses.
Oh, absolutely not. This is real talk.
Yeah.
Real advice from the trenches.
Exactly. So it's packed with his experiences as a tech entrepreneur, a venture capitalist. And what makes it really work, I think, is it's woven with these really personal stories.
Oh, yeah, definitely. And moments of vulnerability.
Yeah.
You really get a sense of the person behind the success.
Absolutely. It makes him so much more relatable, right? Because you see that even the most successful people go through these incredible challenges.
Yeah. He starts the book with this really intense story from his childhood. I mean, really intense.
Oh, the one in Berkeley.
Yeah, about being dared to do something, really racist as a kid.
Mm-hmm.
And it kind of just sets the stage for the whole book. This is about navigating tough environments.
It makes you think about how your early experiences really shape who you become, your resilience, how you handle pressure later on in life.
Well, it's like that whole overcoming adversity thing.
Yeah.
But this is real adversity.
Exactly. And then we jump from there into the dot-com boom. He lands at Netscape and suddenly he's in the thick of it.
Talk about being thrown into the deep end. I mean, given these huge responsibilities right out of the gate.
Managing a crucial product line, right? And the whole company's kind of riding on his success.
I can't even imagine that pressure.
He talks about, the incredible excitement of those early days, like building something completely new, but also the insane hours, the pressure.
And the tough lessons.
Yeah.
Oh, man, the tough lessons.
Remember that email from Mark Andreessen?
Oh, the one with the F-bomb. Come on, that's Silicon Valley legend.
I mean, talk about brutal feedback.
Right. But you know what? It shows how important direct feedback is, even when it's painful. And it says a lot about Horowitz, I think, that he uses that as fuel.
To get better, to
Yeah.
learn. Yeah, it's that theme of embracing the suck. You see that throughout the whole book.
It's not about pretending everything's perfect. It's about, confronting the hard stuff head on.
And I think that's why it resonates with so many people, especially entrepreneurs, people who are actually out there building something, facing those challenges every day.
Makes it real, not just some theoretical pie-in-the-sky business advice.
Exactly. And that leads us to his first company, LoudCloud, and, their near-death experience.
Oh, man, talk about a roller coaster.
Yeah.
They go from this incredible IPO, hitting it big,
To almost going bankrupt, overnight.
classic dot-com bubble burst, right? Market tanks, investors panic.
And suddenly they're facing this very real possibility of, going under.
All your dreams come true, and someone just yanks the rug out from under you. Horowitz calls it, let me get this right, a road show from hell.
A road show.
Yeah, when you're trying to raise money from investors.
Oh, right.
And they were doing this during a stock market crash.
So trying to sell ice to Eskimos?
Worse, probably. People were fleeing the tech sector. And in the middle of all this, he gets this advice from his father-in-law, who, by the way, is a pretty successful CEO himself.
Okay, what do you say?
He said, and I'm paraphrasing a little, if you're going to eat shit, don't nibble.
Whoa, okay, that's direct.
But you know what? It's about facing those difficult situations head on. Don't shy away. Don't try to sugarcoat things.
Be decisive.
Exactly. And that's exactly what he did. Gathered all his employees at this, let's just say budget-friendly motel.
Not exactly the Ritz, huh?
Nope. And he just laid it all out.
Yeah.
No BS. Told them they were bleeding money, they had limited options, and gave them a choice. Stay and fight or, walk away.
Wow. What'd they say?
Most of them stayed. They were inspired by his honesty, by his commitment. They rallied behind him. I mean, that's a leadership lesson right there.
Clear communication, even when it's bad news, it can build trust.
It shows you value your team, that you're all in this together.
It's about building a company culture that can actually withstand those tough challenges.
It's not just about the perks, right?
Yeah.
It's about the deeper stuff.
Yeah.
The values.
Okay, so they survived the dot-com crash, but then they had another near-death experience, this time with EDS, their biggest customer.
Oh, right. And this is after they've pivoted from LoudCloud to Opsware.
Pivoting.
Changing the company's direction, adapting to the market.
Oh, right.
So they're in this new phase, and their biggest client is threatening to walk. Talk about pressure.
And EDS was huge, right?
Massive. Losing them could have been catastrophic. It was a technical crisis. Their product wasn't meeting EDS's needs.
So what did they do? Another all hands at the Motel 6?
Well, not quite. Horowitz, he takes a two-pronged approach.
Okay, I like it. Two-pronged.
He puts his top engineer, Jason Rosenthal, in charge of fixing the technical issues, like ASA.
Okay, makes sense. That's one prong. What's the other?
He has another executive, Anthony Wright, focus on something else entirely.
Like what?
Finding that exciting value to offer EDS, something beyond just fixing the existing problems.
I see. So fix the immediate problem and then wow them with something extra.
Exactly. But here's the thing. They didn't just focus on the technical stuff.
Oh.
They actually tried to figure out why the EDS executive in charge of the contract was so unhappy.
Interesting.
And they found out he hated his job, like really hated it.
Ah, I see. So it wasn't just about the software. It was about, like, his whole work life.
Right. And get this. The guy was requesting these long layovers for flights.
Layovers? Like, why?
So he could hang out at airport bars.
Seriously?
It wasn't about the layovers. It was about escaping his job, even for a few hours.
Wow. So they figured that out and...
It was a light bulb moment. They realized this isn't about software. It's about making this guy's life better.
So what'd they do?
They found a solution. They acquired a smaller company, Tangram.
Tangram.
Yeah, and their product, it was the perfect fit for what EDS actually needed. It addressed the core issues and, probably made that executive's life a bit easier.
That's brilliant. So the takeaway is...
Understand your customers. Really understand their needs, even the ones they don't tell you about.
It's about empathy.
Absolutely. Put yourself in their shoes. Figure out how to make their lives better, even in unexpected ways.
And that's what makes Horowitz's book so good. He doesn't just talk about, numbers and spreadsheets.
It's about the human element of business, the emotions, the struggles, the real stuff.
The stuff we all go through, right?
Exactly. And it reminds me of another story, actually. Remember when Blade Logic emerged as a competitor?
Blade Logic, yeah. Weren't they like a big threat?
Huge. They were offering a similar product to Opsware, and they were gaining traction fast.
So what did Horowitz do?
He rallied his team, gave this raw, honest speech. Basically said, we're getting our asses kicked. We need to hit the target now.
Wow, that's intense.
It was. And years later, one of his employees, Ted Crossman, he said he didn't realize how much the team actually cared about the company until that moment.
Really?
Hearing that, it actually made Horowitz cry years later.
Wow, that's powerful.
It shows you your words have impact even if you don't see it right away.
Be authentic. Be transparent.
And from that experience, Horowitz, he learned something really important about product development. He realized you have to prioritize.
Prioritize? Like, what do you mean?
He said, sometimes you have to ship the wrong product.
Wait, ship the wrong product?
Sounds counterintuitive, right? But it's about learning fast. Get it out there, get feedback, iterate.
I see. So you don't have to have all the answers up front.
Exactly. You learn as you go.
That's a good lesson for anyone building anything, really.
And this leads into another big idea that Horowitz talks about, company culture. But he goes deeper than, the usual stuff.
So what's he talking about?
Cultural design. Intentionally creating a way of working that attracts the right people, that reinforces the values you want.
Like, how does that work in practice?
Well, he gives some pretty interesting examples from Andreessen Horowitz, his venture capital firm.
Oh, right. Like what?
They have this rule, a $10 per minute fine for being late to meetings with entrepreneurs.
$10 a minute.
Yep. Sounds crazy, right?
A little bit, yeah.
But it's about sending a message. Your time is valuable. We respect you. We're serious about working with you.
I see. So a small detail can actually reinforce a bigger cultural value.
Exactly. And they also do this thing inspired by Facebook, actually, where they use lower level titles.
Lower level titles, like instead of having a bunch of VPs running around.
Exactly. It's about emphasizing the engineers, the people who are actually building the products, not just the managers.
Interesting. So the culture really reflects what they value.
And that attracts the right people, the people who thrive in that kind of environment.
So it's not just a buzzword, right? Culture is a real strategic advantage.
It can make or break a company. It can make or break a company. But, we were talking about the big picture stuff. What about those day-to-day leadership challenges?
Oh, yeah. The messy stuff. The stuff that nobody really wants to talk about.
Exactly. Like having to fire people, giving tough feedback.
Dealing with those, difficult personalities.
The things that keep you up at night.
Right.
And Horowitz, he dedicates a good chunk of the book to this stuff.
Okay, good. Because that's the real world, right?
It is. And he has this one chapter called Nobody Cares.
Nobody cares. What's that about?
It's basically his way of saying, look, as a leader, you can't just complain or make excuses.
You have to solve problems.
Exactly. And he's really direct about being decisive, especially when it comes to, letting someone go.
Firing people, yeah.
He says you should never delegate that to HR.
Oh, really?
It's the leader's responsibility.
It's about taking ownership,
Right.
right?
And showing respect for the employee, even in a tough situation.
I bet that's one of the hardest things a leader has to do.
He doesn't sugarcoat it. It's emotionally draining. But he says avoiding it just makes it worse for everyone.
Yeah, I can see that. Prolonging the inevitable.
And he also talks about another tricky situation. Demoting a friend. Someone who's been with you since the beginning.
That's got to be awkward.
It is. But sometimes, as a company grows, those early rock stars, they're not always the right fit for leadership roles later on.
Right. So how do you handle that?
He gives some advice on how to have that conversation honestly, but with empathy. Acknowledging their contributions, but being clear about why the change is necessary.
So it's about making tough decisions, but doing it the right way.
Exactly. And, it all ties back to accountability.
Accountability.
Building a culture where people are expected to own their mistakes.
And learn from them. Yeah, that makes sense.
He even has this section about, let me get this right, lies that losers tell.
Lies that losers tell.
It's basically a list of common excuses that prevent people from taking responsibility.
Oh, I get it. So he's calling out that BS.
Exactly. It's about creating an environment where honesty is valued.
Even when it's uncomfortable.
Right. But it's not about creating a culture of fear,
So how do you balance accountability with, creating a positive work environment?
He talks about giving clear and direct feedback, even when it's negative. He calls it lead bullets.
Lead bullets.
Because you want the message to hit home. But the goal is to help the person improve, not to tear them down.
Okay, so it's about being direct but constructive.
Right. And he also emphasizes transparency, being open with your team about how the company's doing, good and bad.
Why is that so important?
It builds trust. It creates a sense of shared ownership.
Like you're all in it together.
Exactly. Horowitz, he used to hold these regular all-hands meetings.
All hands.
Yeah, where he'd lay everything out for his employees. Financials, competitor analysis, the whole 9 yards.
He was just like an open book.
Pretty much. He's a big believer in over-communicating, especially during times of uncertainty.
That seems counterintuitive, right? Wouldn't you want to downplay the bad stuff?
You'd think so. But being open about the challenges can actually create a stronger sense of unity.
I see. It's like, we're all in this together. Let's figure it out.
Exactly. And along with transparency comes a focus on learning.
Learning? What kind of learning?
Encouraging people to take risks, to experiment, to grow their skills.
So investing in your people.
Exactly. Give them opportunities to step outside their comfort zones.
So we've talked about transparency, feedback, but what about Horowitz's overall leadership philosophy?
Well, he defines leadership as the ability to get someone to do something they wouldn't otherwise do.
Okay, that's interesting.
It's about inspiring action, driving towards a goal. And he breaks it down into 3 core elements.
3 elements?
Yep. Articulating a clear vision, aligning everyone's interests, and then actually having the ability to achieve that vision.
So you need all 3.
You got to have all 3.
Yeah.
And he learned a lot about building relationships from his mentor, Bill Campbell.
Bill Campbell, wasn't he a legendary coach in Silicon Valley?
He was, coached tons of big names. And Campbell, he emphasized listening, really listening to your employees.
That's interesting. So much of leadership advice is about what you say, but he's saying it's about how you listen.
Exactly. Create a space where people feel heard. And that's where authenticity comes in. You can't fake it. People can sense when you're not being genuine.
So be yourself.
Be yourself. And part of that is being vulnerable. He encourages leaders to share their own struggles.
So don't try to be the hero all the time.
Right. It makes you more relatable. It builds empathy.
I can see that. But it's hard, right, to show your weaknesses when you're supposed to be the strong one.
It is. He talks about how lonely it can be being a CEO. So he stresses the importance of having a support network. People outside of work you can talk to.
Friends, family, mentors.
Exactly. And he's even open about his own coping mechanisms for stress.
Like what?
Writing, listening to music, spending time with his family.
So it's about finding balance.
Exactly. You can't pour everything into work. You got to take care of yourself. And he also says, don't take yourself too seriously.
Have a sense of humor.
Exactly. Have fun. Inject some playfulness into the work.
So it's not all doom and gloom.
Not at all. He believes humor can actually make you a better leader.
And celebrate the successes, right? Big and small.
Exactly. Recognize people's efforts. Build momentum.
I like that. So it's not just Horowitz's story, right? He brings in other voices too.
Oh, yeah. He draws lessons from other entrepreneurs and leaders.
Like, ooh.
Steve Jobs, Andy Grove, Bill Gates, people who've been there, done that.
It's like getting a peek behind the curtain, seeing how they operate.
And he's really honest about his own mistakes.
Which makes it all more relatable, right?
Absolutely. He's not pretending he have all the answers. He's just sharing what worked for him and what didn't.
And one of the big themes that keeps coming up is company culture.
Right. He goes beyond the surface level stuff. He talks about culture as the DNA of the organization.
The DNA. I like that.
It's the values, the beliefs, the behaviors that define how the company works.
So it's not just a poster on the wall.
Not at all. It's something you have to intentionally design.
And it has to align with your mission, right?
Exactly. It has to attract the right people.
Huh?
And Horowitz, he sees culture as a competitive advantage.
Something that can really set you apart.
Absolutely. You know, one of the things I really enjoy about his writing is the style.
Oh, yeah, it's so conversational.
Like you're just having a chat with him over a beer.
He's not afraid to use, colorful language.
He even throws in some rap lyrics sometimes.
Is it interesting?
It does. But underneath that casual style, there's a real depth of understanding about leadership.
It's not just fluff.
Not at all. He makes you think.
Yeah.
And he's not afraid to challenge conventional wisdom.
And he's honest about the tough choices he had to make.
Like laying off employees, changing business models.
Scrapping products he was passionate about.
That takes guts.
But he also talks about keeping your eye on the long game.
Right. Don't get bogged down by short-term setbacks.
A focus on building something great.
Creating lasting value. And he brings in the personal side too, right? He talks about building a strong support network.
Having people you trust who can give you advice.
Because being a CEO can be isolating.
You need those people you can lean on. And he also talks about something that's kind of taboo, right?
Oh yeah, selling your company.
A lot of entrepreneurs see that as, giving up.
Failure.
But Horowitz, he flips that on its head.
He says sometimes selling is the best decision.
For everyone.
The founders, the employees, the investors.
And he actually gives you a framework for thinking about it. When does it make sense?
He talks about market conditions, competition, the strengths of your team.
So it's a strategic decision, not just an emotional one.
Right. But he also acknowledges the emotional side of it. It's like saying goodbye to a part of yourself.
It's got to be tough.
It is. But he helps you think through it, make the best decision for everyone. So as we kind of wrap up this part of the deep dive.
It's more than just a business book, right?
It really is. It's a story about resilience, about determination, and ultimately about success.
But it doesn't shy away from the tough stuff.
Not at all. And you know what? There's one chapter I think really captures all of that.
Oh, which one?
The chapter called The Struggle.
The
chapter called The Struggle.
The Struggle, yeah. What's he talking about in that one?
It's not about a specific business strategy or anything.
Right.
It's more about the emotional side of leadership.
Oh, the roller coaster, right.
Exactly. The ups and downs, the stress, the stuff that most business books kind of gloss over.
Right.
He talks about feeling lost, overwhelmed.
Yeah, even physically sick from the pressure.
Yeah. And he shares stories about other CEOs who went through similar stuff.
Anxiety, self-doubt.
That constant fear of failure.
There's that story about his friend's brother, the doctor.
Oh, yeah. The young doctor, right.
Yeah, and a senior doctor tells him a patient is, quote, dead.
Even though the patient had just walked out of the office, seemingly fine.
But the experienced doctor, he knew.
He knew the patient's body wouldn't recover.
It was a heart attack, I think.
Yeah, a heart attack. And it's such a powerful analogy, right?
For a company that might be failing, but nobody sees the signs.
A dead man walking situation.
It's chilling. And that's where resilience comes in.
Exactly. Because, like Horowitz says, the struggle is where greatness comes from.
It's about that grit, that determination to keep going when you want to quit.
When everyone else is telling you to quit.
Right. But he doesn't just say, toughen up.
No, he gives you some real advice on how to handle it.
Like what?
Talk to people who've been there.
Yeah.
Get your thoughts out of your head.
Write things down.
Yeah. Remind yourself you're not alone.
He also learned that trying to carry all the weight yourself,
it doesn't work.
It can actually make things worse, right?
Way worse.
So share the burden.
Exactly. Even if it means showing your vulnerabilities to your team.
It's about being human.
And it can actually make you a stronger leader.
I see that. People see you're struggling too. They're more likely to, step up.
It builds trust.
It creates that shared sense of purpose.
Right. And it goes back to that culture of open communication. where people feel comfortable sharing their concerns, their ideas.
Even the not so positive ones.
Exactly.
Okay, so you've got to be open, but you also have to be decisive.
Yeah. Sometimes you just have to make a call, even if you're not 100% sure it's the right one.
That's tough, especially when so much is on the line.
It is. But Horowitz, he argues that inaction is often worse than making the wrong decision.
Because you're paralyzed by fear.
Exactly. You got to learn to adapt as you go.
And he's big on having that support network outside the company, too.
People you can vent to, get advice from.
Friends, family, mentors.
People who understand what you're going through. Because being a CEO, it can be pretty lonely.
Yeah, I can see that. So much responsibility. Now, there's one part of the book that I found really surprising.
What's that?
Where he talks about selling your company.
Oh, right.
Because a lot of entrepreneurs see that as failure, right?
It's like giving up on your dream.
But Horowitz has a different perspective.
He challenges that whole idea.
Yeah.
He says selling can be the best thing.
For everyone involved.
For the founders, the employees, the investors.
It's not about ego.
No. It's about making a smart business decision. Sometimes selling maximizes the value you've created.
I see. So how do you know when it's the right time?
He gives you a framework for thinking about it.
Okay. What kind of framework?
Looking at the market, the competition.
The strengths and weaknesses of your team.
Exactly.
So it's a strategic decision.
It is. But he also acknowledges the emotional side of it.
Yeah. It's got to be hard to let go of something you've poured your heart into.
It's like saying goodbye to a part of yourself.
So how do you deal with that?
He gives you some advice on how to manage those emotions, how to make the best decision for everyone. It's a really thoughtful perspective.
It's not something you hear a lot, right? Especially from a successful entrepreneur.
No, not really. So I think it's safe to say this book, it's more than just a business book.
It's a memoir, a leadership guide, a philosophy lesson, all rolled into one.
And it's about the human side of it all.
The struggles, the triumphs, the lessons learned.
Exactly.
And, as we wrap up this deep dive, I keep coming back to that idea of resilience.
That grit, the determination to keep going, even when it's hard.
Because building a company, leading a team, it's not easy.
It's one of the hardest things you can do.
But it's also incredibly rewarding.
Absolutely.
So for everyone listening out there, we want to leave you with a question. What stood out to you the most from Ben Horowitz's journey?
What resonated with you?
Maybe it's something about leadership or company culture.
Or how to solve those really tough problems.
Whatever it is, take some time to think about it. And we encourage you to check out the full book, The Hard Thing About Hard Things.
There's so much more to discover.
And remember, there's no magic formula for dealing with the hard things.
But you're not alone.
Build strong team, learn from others.
And find ways to stay resilient.
Until next time, keep diving deep.
Thanks for your time, and subscribe to the channel. See you in the next brief read.